Welcome, and thank you for joining the Superclusters panel. My name is Amy LeMay, and I will be moderating this session. Before we get started, I'll just go over a couple of housekeeping details. We will have lots of time for questions, and you can post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You'll be able to see the questions being posted by other attendees, and I encourage you to upvote the questions that you most want answered. If you have any technical difficulties during the session, you can use the chat feature to get help from the symposium organizers. Now, before we hear from the panelists, I'd like to set things up with a little historical context and background about the Superclusters initiative. The Innovation Supercluster Initiative was first proposed in the 2016 federal budget and formally announced in the 2017 budget as a pillar of the Liberals' Innovation and Skills Plan. The Superclusters would create globally competitive sectors that would boost the Canadian economy through innovation. They were expected to address three long-standing weaknesses of Canadian innovation. First, low investment of R&D in the private sector, a lack of collaboration among Canadian businesses, and a failure to commercialize Canadian technologies. The basic argument in support of this large-scale demand-side approach to innovation policy was that improving the innovation performance of Canadian businesses would lead to economic growth and job creation. Improving innovation performance would boost productivity and make Canada globally competitive. In general, the overarching mission of the Superclusters is to accelerate and facilitate the development, adoption, and integration of Canadian-made transformative and disruptive technologies in key sectors of the Canadian economy. Superclusters bring together small and large companies and other stakeholders to establish strong supply chains within what are called innovation ecosystems. The government investment in the Innovation Supercluster Initiative is $950 million over 5 years, extending through to 2023. The Superclusters are expected to match this investment, making the total value of ISI more than $2 billion. The 2021 budget includes an additional $60 million over the next 2 years for the ISI to account for emergency investments that have been made by the Superclusters to support Canada's COVID-19 response. 5 Superclusters were announced in 2018. They are regionally distributed across Canada, and they broadly represent the industrial sectoral strengths of the regions. The Ocean Supercluster is based in Atlantic Canada. It is pan-Canadian in scope and sectoral in shape, in scale, bringing together stakeholders from diverse industries that operate in the ocean economy. The Scale AI Supercluster in Quebec works with stakeholders to position Canada as a global leader in artificial intelligence. The Next Generation Manufacturing, or NGen Supercluster, is based in Ontario and is focused on serving Canada's diverse manufacturing sectors. The Protein Industry Supercluster in Saskatchewan is developing value-added and export opportunities for Canadian plant-based protein products. The Digital Technology Supercluster in British Columbia focuses on the development, scaling, and adoption of Canadian-made digital technologies. Today, we have CEOs from 3 of the Superclusters on this panel. Kendra McDonald from Canada's Ocean Supercluster, Jason Myers from Next Generation Manufacturing Canada, and Bill Gruel from Protein Industries Canada. Each of them will take about 5 to 7 minutes to share their insights on what the federal budget means for the future of the ISI overall and their own Supercluster in particular. Then we will take questions. A quick reminder to post your questions in the Q&A box and to upvote for your favorite questions. We're going to start in the east with Kendra. Over to you, Kendra.
Excellent. So it's a pleasure to be with you today and share a little bit about the Ocean Supercluster and some comments on the budget. So as we heard, I think, when you look at the Supercluster program overall, and I listened to the conversation earlier, this is innovative policy that is really trying to address Canada's reputation as an innovation nation and change it and tackle some of the systemic challenges that we have around, in particular, commercialization of R&D. And so, when you look at the Ocean Supercluster in particular, what it is trying to do, which is different than previous ocean investments, is this idea of cross-sectoral collaboration. And so in an increasingly digital world, when you look at oil and gas and fisheries and aquaculture. They were all tackling challenges in their own sector. And it was really found that we had actually some common challenges, in particular areas like cost and risk of doing business on the water, as well as an increasingly automated workforce and what the workforce of the future looked like for traditional sectors in ocean. And so it was really built on this idea that if we could change behavior in terms of how we were doing business, that we could really scale more quickly and we could scale solutions to multiple sectors. When you combine that with the fact that there is a $3 trillion ocean economy by 2030, which is a doubling of the current size of the ocean economy, and then you look at the fact that Canada right now, it does not even contribute at the world average in terms of GDP contribution from the ocean economy. So we're at about 1.6% compared to a world average of 3%. So you think about the growth potential when we are in fact a country that has the longest coastline in the world, the 4th largest ocean territory. And so it is an incredible opportunity for Canada to be able to do more. And we have, as we've heard, we have world-class research in ocean. We have lots of work to do to be able to continue to be able to commercialize that research. So where we sit as a supercluster, so we have over 400 members. And yes, while we're based in Atlantic, Canada, we now have 40% of our members that are in the rest of Canada. So that's really exciting for us. We're at about 50 projects, and about 28 of those have been announced, looking to create about 4,000 jobs, 100 products, processes, and services. And 80% of those projects are actually led by small and medium enterprises. So what we've really seen is that it is, in a lot of cases, the smaller businesses that are bringing the exciting, innovative thinking to the larger businesses. And so we're really excited by the number of consortiums that we have with a research partner, a small, medium business, a large company, and in many cases, other government funding partners. And I think that's a lot of what we've heard today, is how we continue to encourage and increase that level of collaboration. What we also heard, which I think is very important to the Ocean Supercluster, is the relevance of thinking global and the number of global factors that impact Canada. And I think we really see that in the blue economy. So whether that is, the high-level panel on sustainability, of which Canada is a part, that is developing action plans around ocean, whether that is the UN Decade of Ocean, which we are currently in, that runs out until 2030, or just the very fact that countries making decisions, whether it's in the Pacific, the Arctic, or the Atlantic, or sort of anywhere in between, actually impact us just because of the way the water flows, right? So, it is very important for us to be aware of what's happening. And this conversation around the blue economy is not just a Canadian conversation. It's a global conversation, and it is moving very, very, very fast. So when I think about, a couple of other thoughts on the budget, I think that certainly there's lots of focus and continued focus on COVID-19 as we're in the 3rd wave. But there's a lot of alignment in terms of the areas of investment for where we are focused. So whether that is digital, we have a number of solutions that are looking at digitizing the ocean economy the way that many other parts of the economy are digitizing. There's lots of work to do to digitize the ocean. We only have about 10% of the ocean floor that is mapped. And so there's just a tremendous amount of data to be collected from a digital perspective, as well as bringing several of the technology solutions that we've heard about to the ocean economy. Equally, in terms of decarbonization, so marine transportation is actually a big contributor to emissions. So we are increasingly seeing projects in the alternative fuel and the alternative energy space, as well as some smart coatings to be able to reduce leaching in the water to improve emissions and reduce emissions, as well as inclusion. So we have a number of our projects that look at trying to improve the ocean economy. You combine the challenge that we have with underrepresented groups and women in the ocean economy with the challenges that we have in technology, and together ocean technology is very challenged in terms of being able to create the diversity and inclusion that we really need for the big challenges that are facing the ocean. And so that's definitely a piece that stands out. I think the other thing that was interesting for us from a blue economy perspective is there was a lot of discussion around ocean health, and ocean health is tremendously important. And what we see is that a healthier ocean is actually 6 times more productive. So there's actually an economic impetus as well in terms of having a healthier ocean. But there's no doubt that anything that we do on the ocean right now, we need to think about the impact that we're having and really try to reduce that footprint. And so there was a lot of focus on that, but there is also blue economy strategy that is underway that is meant to think about the sustainable economic development. And so we didn't see as much of that in terms of what was in the budget. And so we are very excited about the blue economy strategy and really mapping out Canada's future in terms of the blue economy. And so we're hoping to see and continue to see a balance of that conversation between the health and wealth of the ocean. So I will stop there.
Thanks, Kendra. Jason, you're up.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and thanks for inviting us onto the panel. You know, I think it's important to put the Supercluster initiative into perspective. We've been in operation for, this is the third year of our 5-year initial tranche of funding. And when you look at, I think, all of the superclusters, I think it's fair to say that we've all achieved a tremendous amount in terms of the objectives that were set for the program, whether that's to leverage private sector investment in innovation, or helping to scale up smaller companies, or to create good jobs in the innovation economy. All of the superclusters were put in place, frankly, to help apply technologies, apply research to solve challenges, but in areas of industrial application. And I think that's reflecting on our experiences over the past couple of years as we've tried to do it. I think is more important than ever in terms of some of the lessons that we could apply in terms of this budget. And I'd like to kind of reflect on what we've experienced, and in the context of the budget, and more in the case of, or more in terms of implementation, successful achievement of the innovation objectives of the government going forward. I think this issue of application is really important. Our supercluster, other superclusters, are really focusing on how do we apply the strengths we have in research and technology, and in our case in manufacturing, to create something that is world leading, create something that is unique, create something that creates real value for the economy. And you know, in many of the projects that we're involved in, with respect to medical, life sciences, food security, actually improves the lives not only of Canadians, but of many people beyond Canada as well. So easy to say, let's talk about application, let's talk about scale up, but enormously difficult to do. And let's keep in mind that innovation is innovation. There's a lot of risk, market risk, technology risk, research risk, scientific risk, as well as financial risk involved, and that this is a very difficult process, but very important at the same time. We thought it was going to be easy. We'll bring together tech companies and manufacturers and connect them, put partnerships in place, and let everybody go to it. And it's much more difficult than that. I don't know of any manufacturer who actually wants to buy a technology. I know lots of manufacturers, lots of industrial companies that need a solution, but they don't necessarily know how to deliver that solution. They don't necessarily know who is out there with what technologies that would be appropriate to actually create the value to solve the problem that they need to have solved. And I know lots of tech companies, great technology, looking for customers, looking for industrial applications, particularly vexed by the problem that they can't find industrial customers in Canada, but who come to the table with a part of a solution. And that's not what customers want to purchase. So I think need to do, and have been working with this whole innovation ecosystem around advanced manufacturing, not only to bring tech and manufacturing and research together, but to do an awful lot of work in building the collaborative partnerships that are required to deliver world-leading solutions, and especially in advanced manufacturing. I mean, we've got an array of technologies ranging from the sensors that Irene works with all the way through AI, IoT, materials, additive manufacturing, robotics, automation. Unique solutions take a combination of those technologies. It's not a simple application of one technology to solve one problem. And the solutions that are developed can be applied in a number of different industrial sectors. So that's part of the work that we've been doing as an advanced manufacturing supercluster. And I think it's part of the work that all of the superclusters have been doing. I think we've been certainly successful in getting money out the door, but now the projects are underway and we're seeing real results in terms of jobs and in terms of impacts on healthcare, on environmental improvement, and so forth. But just to say as well, the ecosystem and ecosystem support is really important. Bain, Deloitte, McKinsey report that 70% or more of major industrial transformation projects, digital transformation projects, fail. The work that we've been looking at before the supercluster showed that although smaller companies, in particular in Canada, were investing in new technologies, that fewer than half were actually achieving their business objectives. That has a great deal to do with the way that technology is managed, the way that innovation is managed by businesses to actually achieve their business objectives, whether that's through scale up or adoption. And I want to go back to a point that David raised, this issue of management capability and project management, and the ability to manage commercialization is so important for Canadian companies. And we need to do a lot more in this country to enhance the capabilities of companies to do that and make sure that they have the right skill sets and the talent that is available in order to grow their company, whether that's through scale up or actual adoption. I guess one other point, and that's around execution here. Great to set objectives. The objectives, as Kendra was saying, need to be integrated in international view of where technology is going and where the commercial opportunities actually are. I'm a bit concerned sometimes when people talk about, well, let's bring all of manufacturing back to Canada. The value chains are globally integrated and particularly integrated across North America. Our challenge is how to become perhaps even more integrated so that we're not left behind in the development of technology or in good commercial applications here in Canada. But that depends on more than just hooking technology and innovation up with corporate applications or industrial applications. One of the roles of government, we've spoken about procurement, very important. But the other role that government needs to play is make sure that we have the regulatory environment right, the testing, the certification environment. I think the last year, particularly with COVID, has shown real gaps in the Canadian infrastructure when it comes to testing, standards, certifications, and that's clearly the case with a lot of the PPE that has been developed here in Canada. But successful execution, going back to David's point right at the very beginning, really depends on successful collaboration, not only in the types of innovation projects that are being put together by industry, but also across government. And one of the things I think all of the superclusters have shown is that they can be collaborative partners with government, and I think we're all looking at opportunities in this budget, not only from an individual supercluster basis or a supercluster program, but where are the opportunities that where we can work, given the success of the processes that we've put in place, where are the opportunities that we can work to help successfully implement the innovation priorities of the government. So Amy, back to you.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, well, last but not least, we'll hear from Bill in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, and thanks for the organizers to bring me on today. It's always exciting to talk about the agriculture sector in the context of innovation policy. And it's late April here in Saskatchewan, just like it is everywhere, but it's always an exciting time of year because that means planting season is upon us and the start of another crop year. And I'm often reminded this time of the year of the fact that we owe our existence to a layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. And I say that because I want to talk a little bit about the agriculture sector in the context of the budget today on two fronts. One is the idea of food security, food sovereignty, and the need for support for a sector that's so vital to the success of a nation. And the other piece is around the economic opportunity that agriculture and food processing exists for Canada. And so I'll talk about that a little bit. But first off, just for those of you who might not be grounded or overly familiar with the sector, agri-food is actually Canada's largest employer and the second largest contributor to GDP. And Jay talked about supply chains and value chains in manufacturing, and well, food manufacturing is no different. We go from primary production at the farm gate through to commodity handling, ingredient manufacturing, food production, food distribution, food retail, and food service. It's a very complex web with a lot of different actors. And I think that's important as we are going to talk a little bit about innovation policy, just to hold in our mind the complexity of the food system in Canada. Agriculture is also an interesting industry because it's shared jurisdiction in Canada between the federal, provincial, and territorial governments. And really for the last decade and a half, all three levels of government have entered into cost-sharing agreements called the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, which the current iteration of is a 5-year, $3 billion agreement covering innovation, business risk management programming, the largest of which is a production-based crop insurance program, and trade and market development. And I give this background because I want to comment on what was earmarked specifically for agriculture and agri-food in the budget, which wasn't a lot, but I don't want to leave the impression that there is no support for the sector. But if you think about 5 years, $3 billion, 10 provinces in the scope and scale of the industry, it really isn't a lot. And I just want to provide that in terms of context setting for my commentary. So I really enjoyed listening to Dave Waters talk today. A couple of things that I drew from it, and very similar to my colleagues, the idea around a focus on implementation is critical. Innovation as a strategy has to be an export strategy. This could not be more true for Canada's agri-food sector. And so a lot of the work that we're doing at Protein Industries Canada in support of Canada's plant-based food, feed, and ingredient sector thinks about us in the global context. We're only 38 million consumers in Canada, but we are one of the 5 global jurisdictions that's a net exporter of food. And so innovation policy and investments that are made through federal government and all levels of the sector really need to be thinking globally from day one. The idea and concept of supporting risk-taking in innovation policy in Canada, I thought came through in Dave's conversation earlier today. I think that's a really critical piece for us to think about in agriculture, and particularly in plant-based foods, which is the focus of Protein Industries Canada. We're really trying to build an industry that doesn't exist, and it will be strongly rooted in innovation and the creation of food products that do not exist today and have to consider things like price, taste, consumer preference, and environmental footprint. So this idea of risk-taking and de-risking innovation is a really critical piece that I think we're playing a very important role of at Protein Industries Canada. I took away a little bit of the comments around outputs and the fact that we rank 59th in the world in terms of the conversion to commercial technology. So we could explore the idea of how Protein Industries Canada and all superclusters are really working on innovation close to commercialization and the role that we play in helping organizations commercialize and scale faster, but using the best of the public R&D infrastructure in Canada. And maybe just one more commentary on what Dave Waters talked about today was the importance of responding to COVID-19 with industries like PPE and vaccines. And I would put food production and ingredient manufacturing in that hopper as an industry that we need to really think about how we're supporting domestically in Canada, not only for domestic consumption, but also what I just talked about in terms of the export potential. You know, we don't have to go back too far in time where there was supply chain issues and challenges that we were facing in ingredient manufacturing in Canada. I'm not suggesting that there would ever be a food shortage in a nation as food rich as ours, but really thinking about how we would support ourselves and insulate ourselves from future economic shocks by support for food processing in Canada. And maybe before we move on, I'll just talk a little bit about the context of what we see as the economic opportunity for plant-based foods globally. You know, there's been a lot of studies that have come out recently. One of them we commissioned by Ernst & Young. There's been studies by McKinsey. There's been studies by Kearney. All the major marketing firms are looking at the growth of the plant-based food sector. This is an industry that will be measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars a decade or 15 years from now. Anywhere from 250 to 400 billion dollars US is the global opportunity for plant-based foods. That still only represents a fraction of maybe the global meat industry, which is measured in the 1.3 to 1.5 trillion dollars. And so you think about the economic opportunity that this presents for Canada. We are today about 3.3% of the global agri-food export market. We think in Canada, we can be about 10% of the global plant-based food market. So achieving, you know, upwards of a $25 billion annual sustainable injection into the Canadian economy from innovation supported and based in the production of plant-based foods. And so I'm sure we'll get into a number of questions around whether or not the current budget supports the growth of these economic opportunities from the agriculture sector. You know, a few things were maybe missing from the federal budget, but I do believe that we've got strong support for, you know, what I would call the left-hand side of the value chain. That's production and agriculture and producers. We really need to think about innovation at the ingredient and food manufacturing sector because of not only the underlying need for strong domestic food policy in Canada, but to take advantage of what is an unprecedented economic opportunity globally that checks off things like food security, Canada's green growth strategy, and a number of other issues that are held very dear to Canadians. So I'll put my opening comments there, Amy, and we'll open up for questions.
Thanks, Bill. I'm kind of surprised here. We only have one question, which is quite unusual for a CSPC symposium, but that's okay because we had some questions already planned. The question actually is specific to the Ocean Supercluster, but I'm going to expand on it because it does speak to one of the questions that I had already planned. The specific question for Kendra, but I'm going to expand on it in a minute. Given that there's $647 million over 5 years announced for conservation of Pacific wild salmon, do you see the Ocean Supercluster collaborating with that initiative? And if I just expand on that question, the budget, the 2021 budget, did provide an additional $60 million over the next 2 years for the superclusters. But I'm wondering, as well as that question, are there other science, research, and innovation investments in the budget that your superclusters could tap into or leverage to further support your mandates?
Okay, so let me start with the first part of the question. So, yep. I mean, we have and look for all opportunities to collaborate. I think from a supercluster, so the Ocean Protection Plan, which was announced a few years ago, is a $1.5 billion sort of separate investment. And where they often intersect is where we have a company or a project that is trying to commercialize technology that is relevant to some of those objectives. And that's where they fit. And so this, as another example, would be another opportunity for us to collaborate where there may be something that is being developed as part of a project that would be relevant to some of the objectives of that particular program. So that would be an example. I think in terms of the budget overall, and I think I touched on them a little bit in terms of what I spoke to, but certainly when it comes to decarbonization and the whole focus on green, which was which was very much part of the budget, we're very focused on blue-green, right? So marine transportation, huge contributor, zero emissions in the marine transportation sector, a significant objective, reducing waste in terms of food production, also significant, reducing footprint when it comes to aquaculture. So there's lots of alignment there, I think. So that is one. And when you look at digital skills as well, we need a huge digitalization of the ocean workforce. And so I think in terms of more broadly what the budget is trying to accomplish there is very much relevant to us from an ocean sectors, I guess, perspective.
Bill or Jason, any ideas on how you leverage other investments from the budget?
Well, let me also go. You know, when I look at the projects we funded, when I look at our project pipeline here, and the focus that we've put on projects in biomanufacturing, in medical device manufacturing, recently in the development of battery technologies, not only for vehicles but also stationary storage, energy storage. When I look at the number of projects in terms of digitizing processes and introducing new ways of decarbonizing industrial process, I think those are really important areas. They're certainly priorities that were flagged in the budget. We're already have made significant investments in those areas, and I think there are opportunities to work with the government and look for additional funding opportunities to support these really good projects that we've lined up and that we know are out there. I think that's a part of at least the strength of NGen. We have done a pretty good job in focusing on strategic projects and with industrial partners that are ready to go. It's a different approach than SIF, for example. It's not a company funding approach. It is a collaborative consortium approach, but it's also an approach that looks at across the entire value chain, and that's where a lot of the innovation actually happens, by integrating applications across the value chain. I have to say as well, though, I mean, I don't see the role of NGen as simply going out and trying to get government money. Here, I think it's important for us to continue to look at ways that we can help to tie the ecosystem together, work with partners across the ecosystem, with provincial governments, with federal government agencies for sure, but also with private sector organizations, with colleges, universities across the ecosystem. And I manage the great technologist that I am. I managed to erase one of the questions out there, which was, how do you work with innovation centers in Ontario? And I think that's a really good example of where a supercluster can operate to, first of all, raise awareness across the country, work with clusters across the country, work with startup and innovation centers across the country, not only to support their activities, but also to bring them together and build greater collaboration across the entire ecosystem across the country. You know, 35% of our members and the companies that are involved in our projects are from outside of Ontario. But we don't do a very good job in Canada of promoting, raising awareness about the great opportunities that we have, and that includes innovation centers, and connecting startups with actual business opportunities. And I think that's where we're not competing, we're supporting the activities of these centers. And I think that's a very important role that the superclusters can play in supporting the ecosystem. And it's a role, frankly, that if there's enough value in it from the private sector side, that government funding is not necessary for that type of activity.
Amy, I might just add, I really support Jay's assertion that, you know, we don't exist to deliver government programming. Now that it's essential to building new industries in the near term, and I think we have demonstrated outcomes around GDP and job growth by de-risking innovation in some of these newly emerging industries or places where Canada can be global economic powerhouses. And so I do agree with that assertion. I think the other thing I might add is that said, superclusters were built on a foundation of collaboration. So this idea of working to create the ecosystem so that our members can benefit from what has been put forward in this budget through the Strategic Innovation Fund or Net Zero Accelerator or MyTax or the Digital Skills Program is a really critical role for the innovation superclusters to play.
Thanks for those answers, everyone. So I have a question here for Bill. Someone's asking, what are the opportunities for lightly processed pulses in the domestic market?
Yeah, well, I could kill the rest of the time just talking about that, but I'll be brief. I think one of the things that we see as the market opportunity for Canada is really a couple things for lightly processed pulses. One, the largest being application in the meat alternative market. And so this goes beyond what we would see in texturized vegetable protein, which could be things like patties and sausages that we see at the grocery store, but also the next evolution of this, which is whole muscle meats. I think there's application for fortified beverage markets, the alternative seafood market, egg replacements. I mean, the innovation possibilities are almost endless as we look to the application of Canadian grown products into the global plant-based food market. What's really interesting for us is that the crops that we produce in Canada stand to will make up a significant portion of the global plant-based food market 10 or 15 years from now. So whoever that was, I'd be happy to take this offline and talk more in depth about this.
Just for the sake of everyone that's on the panel, Bill, can you just sort of give us examples of what pulses are?
Oh, sorry. Pulses are crops that include peas, lentils, and dry beans and chickpeas. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Canada one of the highest exporters of lentils in the world?
Lentils, peas, chickpeas, all of them. We're the largest exporter in the world of all of those crops.
Great. Okay. This is a question for all three of you. What is the role of the host provinces in supporting the Supercluster initiative?
Well, I'll go. So I'm located in Saskatchewan, but I actually have people in 5 cities spread throughout Western Canada. And in fact, one of our employees just moved to Victoria, BC. So we cover all 4 prairie provinces, but we really have a national mandate. We've got projects led from 5 or 6 different provinces that go from Quebec right through to British Columbia. So I think the host province, for us, we are we think national in scope, and so I just happen to live in Regina, but could live anywhere.
Maybe a slightly different spin on that. So we too have a team in 6 cities across 4 provinces in Atlantic Canada. I think for me, one of the things that's very important is obviously ocean. Most of our provinces, or many of our provinces, have some part of the coast. And what the needs are in that particular province in terms of infrastructure and supports for ocean are different. And so what we're seeing is the province is making complementary investments to be able to sort of fully take advantage of the opportunity across the ocean innovation ecosystem. So for example, in BC now they have COAST, which is their sustainable technology center. Obviously you've got Cove that is on the east coast. And so what we're seeing is different versions of what is most appropriate. New Brunswick has its own strategy around ocean. So they're really trying to think through what is the way that they can be complementary and sort of fully take advantage of the ocean opportunity for Canada as it applies specifically to their province.
Yeah, and for us, the government of Ontario was it played a really instrumental role in the development of NGen at the very beginning, and the the setup of the supercluster. Right now, we're partnering with the Ontario government on a number of initiatives, but in large part in terms of collaborative funding opportunities where we trade information about project opportunities. We look at opportunities to co-fund projects, but we do that with the province of British Columbia, Alberta, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, and Manitoba as well. So we also have a broad national mandate, and Ontario is, of course, where the largest concentration of manufacturing and advanced manufacturing technology is located. But we've got tremendous opportunities, I think, right across the country, and we've really focused on engagement with provincial governments as well as with the federal government in carrying out our mandate.
Great, thank you. So we have another question here. It's been suggested throughout the symposium by a number of speakers that this budget has no vision. Do you agree with this, and what are your thoughts?
Well, let me go. I disagree. I think the budget has lots of vision. I think the issue is implementation here and execution, and that's where the how do we meet the objectives, not only the budget, but the objectives of growing the economy and innovation in terms of creating that wealth as a result of the research and the great research, the great technology we have here. So I think the key thing here will be to make sure that the programs that are put in place are effective, that they are monitored and measured in a way where we're measuring impacts and outcomes, and rather than perhaps just inputs in the amount of money that is being allocated to various programs.
Bill, Kendra, any thoughts?
Yeah, I might just add, this is, it's maybe easy to poke holes and throw stones, right? But this is really truly unprecedented times. And I'd maybe reflect on 15 years in government in my career, that these are really, really hard policy decisions that needed to be made at a critical juncture in Canada's, not only just our economic growth, but what's happening from a pandemic perspective, and thinking about what we need to do as a nation. And so, I would agree with Jay. I mean, there's things that are challenging. Was this the right time to create 270 new programs? But I think at the same time, we had to do something to do this. And I don't envy the politicians and the policymakers on this one. It's a really, really challenging time. And so I think this is all about us executing, as has been said a number of times, and that is a challenge for us in Canada, but we really need to take what we've been given here and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I echo Bill's comments. I think in terms of the pandemic and the pandemic impacts and everything that continues to happen across the country, that had to be and continue to be a key area of focus. Certainly for us from a blue economy perspective, and I mentioned this at the beginning, the blue economy strategy for us, we're hoping will be very complementary to what was in the budget, which was very focused on ocean protection, and it will bring with it the vision of economic recovery and where we want to be as a nation in terms of the blue economy. So we're looking to that as providing sort of the complementary vision to what's in the budget from a blue perspective.
Great, thank you.
If I could maybe just add too, and it's something that Dave Waters finished up his presentation on, and that's about how do we're not going to create all of this opportunity in Canada itself. So what is the strategy to internationalize the commercialization of not only the IP that is being created, but the actual products, the solutions that are being generated as a result of the innovation that is going to be supported by the budget. And really can't emphasize enough the real crucial importance of international trade and the trade commissioners and EDC, and one of the organizations that is often overlooked, the Canadian Commercial Corporation, where I think there are so many opportunities today for CCC to undertake contracts with international governments that would allow Canadian manufacturers of medical devices and PPE and frankly many of the test kits and the biomanufacturing products that are being developed in Canada to get that out to people who need it today. I think that's a role that organization could play, should play, and frankly, I again going to this issue of how do we build a collaborative infrastructure of government agencies and organizations that can actually deliver not just the efficient execution of the budget, but actually deliver good outcomes and impacts for Canadians. And that's where all of this needs to begin. It's not the budget, it's what are the impacts we need to achieve.
Kendra or Bill, do you want to add to that? Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question here. We've got lots of time. So like most large-scale science, research, and innovation policy experiments, which the ISS has been referred to, and I'm thinking here, Genome Canada, the Networks of Centers of Excellence, Canada Foundation for Innovation, the promise of science, research, and innovation is a key driver of the Innovation Superclusters initiative. The program was conceived around certain expectations and promising visions of the future. Now that the superclusters are operational and the realities of your mandates have set in, how do you think those expectations and visions of the future need to be adapted or modified?
Let me start off. I'm not so sure that the objectives that were set for the superclusters need to be modified. I think they're good objectives here. I think we've all done a really good job in achieving many of those objectives, and we'll do even better as our projects near completion here. So the impacts are extremely important. I think we need to be able to speak to those impacts and to recognize those impacts more effectively than perhaps we have here. But I think that's very important. But one thing that the superclusters were set up to do was to drive industry-led applications of technology and research. And I think that's so important because Canada has had a history of technology push and innovation push. And the superclusters are an example of a different type of approach, which of course it depends on research and innovation, but it also matches that with industry demand and industry pull. And it's the ability to find industrial or other applications for the innovation that's what really counts. And I think that's and also the collaborative nature of what we're trying to achieve in terms of superclusters. I know in manufacturing, I know no world-leading advanced manufacturing project or capability that can be achieved one company at a time. I think the technology is so diverse, and the focus has to be on creating unique solutions. Unique solutions that are manageable and affordable and competitively priced. And that's what makes the difference in terms of commercialization. So I think those two aspects of the demand pull and the collaboration are just so critical to superclusters. And really, both of them are unique characteristics of the supercluster initiative. And I think that is something that we really need to focus on even more.
Yeah, Amy, I would agree. If you think about what the top line metrics were for us when we were started, it was GDP and job growth. And what could be more important in today's economy than that? Like as a nation, we're staring at a $354 billion deficit, not to mention the long-term impacts that's going to have on national debt. And we only get there through a combination of spending reduction and economic growth. And so here we've got an opportunity for economic growth in 5 sectors of the economy where Canada can be a global leader, working with companies that are developing near-term commercial products there, and they're the only ones that create GDP and job growth. So I would contend that we need to double down on the metrics.
Great. Kendra?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same, that when I think about the ocean supercluster specifically, part of our vision was that if we could change the way we did ocean business, that would allow us to be able to achieve those GDP growth and job growth targets. And I was also told it was highly unlikely. It was highly unlikely that you could get oil and gas working with the culture of fisheries, working with aquaculture. And oh, by the way, that's all of Pan-Atlantic collaboration. And by the way, East Coast, West Coast, Arctic, which are all slightly different cultures in terms of how they operate. And hey, could you just mix that all together and get it working, productively working to create outcomes? And we're starting to see that. So the power of that to truly change and how much of that sticks can make a difference for the country, and it will make a difference for the world. And that is, to me, still the right vision.
Excellent. We've got a couple questions here. They're quick ones. And I think, Jason, one's for you. And I think you may have alluded to this question already, but I'm going to give it back to you. Given Ontario's highly developed, advanced manufacturing innovation ecosystem, what has been the value add of NGen within Ontario, and how does NGen's activities align with those of the Ontario Network of Entrepreneurs, especially the Regional Innovation Centers, or the RICs?
Yeah, that's the question I thought I had to raise. So Ontario has some of the best technologies, the best research, and the best manufacturing capabilities, frankly, in the world. What we don't have is a well-developed ecosystem. We have lots of companies, lots of organizations working on their own that are not necessarily even aware of the capabilities that exist down the street. I have 2 board members who didn't know each other until they sat down my board, a textile company and an auto parts company that manufactures car seats, and figured out that they had some business opportunity here, and developed an innovation partnership. Their facilities are located next to each other, but didn't know each other before that. So I disagree that we have a well-developed advanced manufacturing ecosystem in Ontario. And one of the biggest things that we're doing, and the priorities that we're doing, is trying to knit together a much more collaborative and a much more coordinated approach to advanced manufacturing, including various clusters, including the Ontario Network of Entrepreneurs and the Innovation Centers. That's all a part of what we're doing. I think the other part of this as well, and we're doing it in other provinces too. The other part of what we're focusing on, though, is the scale up. We're not focusing on the development necessarily of the startup community itself or of prototype development. We're focusing on the business development and the business scale up of companies that can be a part of a manufacturing solution. And so we work very closely with innovation centers in Ontario, right across Canada, to help take the technology and either integrate it into a larger scale manufacturing project or provide the production capabilities themselves for successful scale up.
Thanks. And we've got another question here about the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted your ability to ramp up and develop new economic activity?
I would say initially back, in March of 2020, it was really tight working capital for our members, maybe having to pull back on innovation and challenges with hiring new staff to support the work that we're doing. I think R&D has slowed down to some degree because of shutdown in government labs and private labs because of physical distancing rules. I think those have largely been solved. I would say now the biggest issue is tightening growth capital markets that are preventing some of the organizations that we're supporting grow. And so it has slowed down some innovation. I would say, however, there's been extreme optimism in the food space, particularly around plant-based protein and the production of both ingredients and food products coming out of a pandemic, because this is one sector of the economy that's done extremely well. And I wouldn't quite call it shock-proof, because the food service industry was really affected and impacted, but everything from ingredient and food manufacturing, food distribution, and retail has done well. So a lot of optimism and investment in the sector.
Yeah, I would say, from an ocean perspective, the ocean economy was pretty hard hit with the pandemic. When you look at, the cruise ships and the restaurants and what that did for the demand for fisheries and aquaculture, marine transport, as well as offshore oil and gas with price wars and the impact of that. So there's lots happening at the same time. So we pivoted our programming to look at sort of shorter term, smaller scale projects that were more manageable, I think, for small and medium enterprises to be able to continue to innovate, which was really powerful. I would say one of the positives from the pandemic, probably one of the biggest positives, is we were a big geography, right? And so we were constantly negotiating, is that an event on the East Coast? Do we do it in the middle so everyone can get there? Do we do it on the West Coast? How do we balance? And then all of a sudden we were virtual. And so all those barriers to working together from a geography perspective went away almost overnight. And that has really created some powerful partnerships that we may just not have seen the same way if we had not had the pandemic.
And Jason, I think NGen pivoted quite quickly to respond to the pandemic in specific ways.
Yeah, we did. Although I have to say that all of our pandemic investments were all in advanced manufacturing capabilities. We continued to invest in unique capabilities, very much along the lines of our core business and core objectives. But yeah, we saw a number of impacts as the pandemic hit and still with us. A lot of uncertainty, not only in terms of market demand, but also in terms of supply chain risk. That having an impact on the bottom line. Those are the negatives. But we also saw companies in the manufacturing sector and in the advanced manufacturing sector in particular pivot very quickly to produce new products in new ways. And so the types of projects that we've supported, whether they're in new various ways of producing or developing materials for PPE, or the development and manufacturing of test kits or vaccines or medical devices. It's been a very, I shouldn't say surprising, but it's a very, very positive development, and I think shows the ingenuity and the ability with advanced technologies that companies in Canada do have there, and it really does show the importance, I think, of taking innovation and actually being able to deliver something that is, in this case, saving lives, and through products, and that's the most important thing in manufacturing, of course.
Okay, I think we're just going to close off questions there. We've only got about 2 minutes left, and I want to take some time to thank Kendra, Bill, and Jason for taking the time to join us today, and for all those who are attending. Please be sure to respond to the feedback poll that's going to launch shortly. And I am going to invite you to join the next session at 3:30, where we'll hear from the business and industry panel. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the symposium.